For 3 years, I was Julian Devereux's stand-in girlfriend. I knew he'd never marry me, never give me the title. But I was always pragmatic. He gave me money, and I treated him like the boss he was. Just as I was starting to think my retirement was a distant dream, he brought a woman home. She looked like me. She had to be the real deal, the legendary Meow Meow. From the second-floor balcony, binoculars in hand, I watched Julian's Rolls-Royce glide to a stop outside. He stepped out, cradling a little boy in his arms. Julian, who supposedly loathed children. Puzzled, I watched as another figure emerged from the back seat, a beautiful woman. Her resemblance to me was uncanny, maybe 70%. Then it hit me. She was the girl from Julian's phone wallpaper, long black hair, white and blue school uniform. The girl he mumbled about in his sleep when he'd had too much to drink, always calling out, meow meow. Suddenly, it clicked. The original was back. My 3-year stint as a substitute was officially over. And Julian? He was a dad now. Double congratulations were in order, though perhaps not for me. For 3 years, Julian had kept me tucked away in this villa, a gilded cage. I always knew there was no future for us. My background was ordinary, I offered him nothing his world truly valued. His family might tolerate me as a pet, a temporary indulgence, but never as someone worthy of the Devereux name. Being sensible, I packed my suitcase, settling in my room to wait for Mr. Davies, Julian's assistant, to handle the exit formalities. As a substitute, I knew my role. Julian was the CEO, and I was his contract employee. Money exchanged hands, services rendered. Simple. I quickly messaged him on WeChat. Boss, final invoice. Instantly, 1,000,000 yuan landed in my Alipay account. I couldn't help but click my tongue in disapproval. Cheapskate. Other CEOs paid out millions, villas included, to their departing substitutes. Julian, though? A mere million. Still, it was 2 months' salary, give or take. For 3 years, I'd been like a painting in his collection, hung in his private chambers, occasionally glanced at. I hadn't exactly suffered. After what felt like an age, the door creaked open. A little boy, maybe 2 or 3, stood there, looking lost. He glanced back, then at me, confusion clouding his cherubic face. Mommy? 2 mommies? Ethan, that's not polite. A woman's voice, sweet and melodic, drifted in from the hallway. I quickly donned my sunglasses, thinking fast. You must be Julian's sister-in-law. I've heard he has a beautiful sister-in-law. Such a shame, I'm blind. A perfect excuse. A good substitute leaves without a trace, vanishing like morning mist. Erase all evidence. Mr. Davies, impeccably dressed as always, arrived just then. Seeing the bizarre scene, he adjusted his glasses, unfazed. Miss Anna, this is Miss Sophia Lin, Mr. Devereux's cousin. Sophia offered a gentle smile. Hello, Miss Lin. I'm Sophia. Did Ethan frighten you? Her voice was like honey. I thought of my own voice. When I played online games, teammates always told me to go back to my homework. Now I understood why Julian preferred I remained silent. And no, I stammered, waving a hand blindly in the air, continuing the charade. Mr. Davies, are the tickets to America booked? Is Dr. Smith back? Mr. Davies's lips twitched. Miss Lin, Dr. Smith has returned. Your flight is at 3 this afternoon. We should head to the airport. Excellent, Mr. Davies. Could you assist me? As I stood, Sophia stepped forward, gently taking my arm. Allow me, Mr. Davies. You can take Miss Lin's luggage. Ethan ran to Sophia, clinging to her leg. Mommy, 2 mommies. My heart skipped a beat. Mr. Davies immediately interjected, the stairs are a bit steep, Miss Sophia. Perhaps you could carry young Master Ethan, and I'll assist Miss Lin. I leaned heavily on Mr. Davies, who effortlessly carried my suitcase while supporting me. I could feel the taut muscles in his arm. Impressive, Mr. Davies. Never would have guessed you were so strong, looking all bookish and assistant-like. Mr. Davies. You little rascal, Sophia chuckled, kissing Ethan's forehead, her gaze apologetic. Sorry, he gets a little shy around new people. I shook my head. No problem at all. Julian really should have installed an elevator, letting you stay on the second floor, Sophia continued, walking beside me, Ethan in her arms. When will you be back? I saw Julian lounging on the living room sofa, downstairs, looking utterly bewildered. When the leaves fall, I suppose. Mr. Davies. Reaching the living room, Sophia frowned at Julian. Julian, your cousin is leaving, and you're not even going to see her off? Julian? He noticed my sunglasses and the blind act, his brow furrowing slightly. As long as the job wasn't officially over, I was still on payroll. Professionalism dictated my next actions. Brother, I said, I'm going to America. Whether or not my eyes can be cured, I won't be coming back. Julian looked puzzled. What's wrong with your eyes? He came closer, removing my sunglasses, pinching my chin to examine my face. Why is your eyeshadow smudged like you've been punched? I turned my face away. This land is a place of sorrow. It buried my youth and stole my joy. Julian chuckled. Just lost your 50-50 pull in the game? That's hardly reason to flee the country. Seriously, how dense was this man? No wonder Sophia already had a child and was back in his life. I sighed inwardly, grabbed my sunglasses back from Julian, and put them on again, trying to salvage the situation and clear up the misunderstanding for Sophia's sake. Brother, ever since Dad's car accident, you've been taking care of me. I'm grateful, but I can't rely on you forever. You have your own life. I can't be a burden. Julian frowned. How many fathers do you have? I covered my face, pretending to cry, pressing on. Someone like me should just stay in America and never return. Julian glanced at Sophia, who was still holding Ethan, finally grasping the white moonlight and long-lost cousin dynamic. After a moment's thought, he said, that might be for the best. Then, turning to Mr. Davies, David, she's upset about losing her 50-50 in the game, feeling a bit down. Arrange for a few people to accompany her to America, let her relax. Yes, Mr. Devereux. I breathed a sigh of relief. After all that, we were back on track. This million was definitely well earned. In the car, I couldn't stop sighing, directed at Mr. Davies's back. He shifted uncomfortably, finally turning around at a red light. Is Miss Lynn feeling unwell? 3 years of working together, and Mr. Davies was still so formal. Mr. Davies, I'm unemployed now. You can call me Anna. The light turned green, and the car moved forward. In the rearview mirror, I saw Mr. Davies offer his signature professional smile. Miss Lynn is joking. You are the person Mr. Devereux cares about most. I'm just his assistant. If Sophia hadn't shown up, I might have believed him. But Mr. Davies, as Julian's long-term right-hand man, knew their history. His loyalties were clearly with Sophia. I suspected he was being sarcastic, but I had no proof. I said, you're Julian's lapdog, and I'm Julian's, well, I was Julian's kept woman. Who's more noble? Humph. For some reason, I wanted to crack that polite mask of his, see what lay beneath. The America trip was Julian's final perk. He was such a cheapskate. I'd read countless CEO romance novels, and he still managed to plumb new depths of frugality. After 2 weeks of playing tourist in America, I ditched Julian's Minders and snuck back to China. A good substitute knows when to exit gracefully. Lingering would be impolite. I deleted all of Julian's contact information and cancelled my SIM card, cutting off all loose ends. Mission accomplished. Then, I returned to my hometown, ready to embrace a life of blissful indolence. My hometown, a small county in S City, had a low cost of living. As long as I wasn't extravagant, my savings from the past 3 years would last me a lifetime. After a month or so, my aunt announced she was setting me up with a blind date, a senior from my high school, 2 years above me. Initially, I wasn't keen. But then my aunt mentioned he was 6'1", had a six-pack, was handsome, and earned $1 million a year. Suddenly, I was very interested. I instantly added the contact my aunt sent. Since high school and aside from Julian's semi-arrangement, I'd only had one real relationship, which ended in a spectacular betrayal. For years together, and my ex cheated for 3.5 of them. If it hadn't been for Julian, I might have sworn off men for life. Julian, despite being stingy on my departure, had been quite generous for the first 2 years. 1,000,000 yuan on the dot every month, random transfers. For no reason. His transfer records were more frequent than his visits to my bedroom. Anyone unaware would think he'd befriended a sentient ATM. In that light, Julian was almost a sentimental, wealthy man. Senior accepted my friend request the next morning. I clicked on his Moments feed and nearly drowned in a sea of abs. I sent a drooling emoji. Pure heaven. Is this some random model? He replied instantly with an ellipsis. I quickly added, don't delete me. I'm not a creep. I'm just physically weak. Your abs are my life force. Another, longer ellipsis appeared. But the next second, he sent several more abtastic photos I hadn't seen before. I declared him a living saint. After 3 days of chatting, the living saint announced he was taking leave to come home for a blind date. To avoid appearing too enthusiastic, I put on makeup, a cute sundress, and heels. Arriving at the agreed-upon restaurant, I spotted a man in a suit sitting at a table, laptop open before him. Oh. Abs hard at work. So hot. Click-clacking in my heels, I approached, flashing a demure smile and using my sweetest voice. Hello, abs. I mean, Senior. Senior looked up. His polite smile froze, his pupils widened, and his jaw dropped. My own smile faltered. I'd been so focused on the abs, I hadn't even asked his name. Oh, dear. Blind date, with my ex-sugar daddy's right-hand man? We sat across from each other in awkward silence. Mr. Davies, or rather, Senior, nervously averted his gaze. Who knew the man who always looked so buttoned up was secretly an flaunting fiend? Mr. Davies, two-faced much? Mr. Davies, being Mr. Davies, recovered quickly. In the blink of an eye, he was back to his usual composed self. He spoke first, his voice laced with false concern. Miss Anna, Mr. Devereux is ill. He sounded so grave, as if Julian being sick was some kind of cosmic anomaly. 10 out of 10 CEOs had stomach problems, and the other one was probably terrified of women. I said, oh. He adjusted his glasses. Mr. Devereux has been looking for you these past few days. I swallowed hard. Looking for me? Why? Did he know I'd sold all the jewelry he'd given me? Or that I'd put his designer clothes and handbags on resale platforms? Julian hated it when people regifted or sold things he'd given them. 3 years ago, when I first started with Julian, he gifted me a necklace. A colleague admired it and wanted to buy it. Seeing her enthusiasm, I just gave it to her. Julian went ballistic when he found out. No, I had to disappear again, make myself untraceable. I opened my phone. The screen was still displaying Mr. Davies's photos. An idea sparked. I held my phone up to his face, a sinister smile playing on my lips. Mr. Davies, you wouldn't want your boss to find out about you sending me late-nighted pics, would you? Mr. Davies. He asked warily, what does Miss Lynn want? Nothing much. Just for Mr. Davies to pretend he never saw me. But, he hesitated. If you tell Julian, I'll send him the entire chat history. Mr. Davies, you wouldn't want to lose your job, would you? And just like that, the most bizarre blind date ever came to an abrupt end. That evening, my aunt called, asking why I hadn't jumped at the chance to snag such a high-quality man like David Lee. Finding someone like him again would be tough, she lamented. How could I snag him? He was Julian's lapdog. Hanging up, I opened WeChat, intending to harass Mr. Davies, but the message failed to send, a red exclamation mark flashing beside it. The next morning, I was jolted awake by insistent knocking. Glancing at my phone, it was only 5 a.m. Grumbling, I dragged myself to the door. You better have a damn good reason to be here. Who is it? The knocking stopped. A voice, laced with an unsettling calmness, replied, delivery. I peered through the peephole. Pitch black. Creepy. I immediately called building security, asking for a couple of guards to come up. Only after hearing the security guards' voices did I feel safe enough to crawl back into bed, sleeping until noon. Opening my bedroom door, stretching languidly, I headed for the bathroom. Half asleep, I noticed someone sitting on the sofa. My Drowsiness vanished instantly. Eyes wide, I stared. Julian. Dangling 4-drip in hand, face ashen, sitting right there in my living room. Thinking it was a nightmare, I walked over and smacked him on the head. My hand stung. It was real. Julian's blood flow reversed course with my smack. He yanked the 4-needle out, blood instantly welling up, flowing freely. His voice, low and raspy, awake? What a bloody entrance. What a bloody power play. He continued, Anna Lynn. I need a reasonable explanation. Damn it. He must know I sold his gifts. My guilt surfaced. Sorry, those things, they didn't really mean much to me. Of course, if you want them back. Before I could finish, Julian shot to his feet. He glared at me, a wounded animal. What did the last 3 years mean, then? Things from 3 years ago? They were outdated fashion, dusty relics. But I couldn't say that. I tried a softer approach. I just found them better homes. Blood dripped onto the floor, forming a crimson puddle. Julian's voice weakened. Why didn't you ask if he needed them? Huh? Could inanimate objects speak now? Was Julian losing it? He looked at me, a bleak smile twisting his lips. Anna, why are you always so cruel to me? My attention was fixated on the growing pool of blood. Alarm bells rang in my head. Dude, stop bleeding. It's freaking me out. No sooner had the words left my mouth than his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed onto the floor. Mr. Davies had blacklisted my number. I had to use Julian's phone to call him. After a few attempts at facial recognition, I finally unlocked it. Julian's phone security was surprisingly bad. The wallpaper was that girl, meow meow, so much like me. For a fleeting moment, I saw my high school self, though my features were sharper now, hers still softened with youthful roundness. My gaze drifted to the school badge on her uniform. Linlon High School. My alma mater. How had I never seen her? But there was no time for reminiscing. I found David Davies in his contacts and dialed. The call connected instantly. Mr. Davies's voice, flat and emotionless, came through the speaker. Mr. Devereux, how may I assist you? Honestly, knowing him for 3 years, if it hadn't been for recently getting his personal WeChat, I'd have sworn he was a robot. Mr. Davies, I said, want a promotion and a raise? Silence. Then, Miss Lynn, it's my day off. Please contact me during business hours. He hung up abruptly. Dragging Julian to the sofa, I propped him up. Snapping a photo of his pathetic state, I sent it to David Davies on Julian's WeChat. An instant reply, Miss Lynn, please apply pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding. I'm on my way. 5 minutes later, the bleeding had stopped. Instead of Mr. Davies, Julian's friend, Yang Ming, his personal physician, showed up. He walked in, took in the scene, Julian sprawled on the sofa, bloodstains everywhere, and was momentarily speechless. Hands in his suit pockets, he casually approached, examining Julian before saying, Anna, his health isn't great as it is. His stomach issues are mostly stress-induced, often by you. Could you maybe try to be a little less stressful? I was bewildered. Stomach problems are a CEO perk, right? What's it got to do with me? Isn't it just standard CEO equipment, like you? Yang Ming was speechless. Have you ever met a CEO's doctor friend whose last name is as common as ours? I pondered this. Dr. Yang did sound rather generic. Okay, my bad. I'll just disappear. And no, wait, Yang Ming reached out a hand, trying to stop me. Without another word, I turned and marched out, stopping in the hallway by the elevator. Wait a minute. This was my place. They should be the ones leaving. I turned back. The door was still wide open. Julian, who had been unconscious, was now sitting up on the sofa, face pale, eyes filled with existential despair. Yang Ming, could you cut the small talk? Yang Ming, So, what now? Well, he's experiencing this crisis at your place. Maybe, try emotional blackmail? Julian looked even more desolate, covering his eyes with his hand. Do you think she has emotions? Yang Ming pondered. She did rewrite your love letter and pass it off as her own to someone else. It's debatable. Eavesdropping in the hallway, Julian had been one of the guys who sent me love letters back then? That was a surprise. I remembered my sophomore year. I had a crush on the school heartthrob. I wanted to confess with a love letter, but I was clueless about what to write. Eventually, I had the brilliant idea to repurpose someone else's letter. I spent a whole night reading through the stack I'd received and found one that seemed perfect. I'd long forgotten the contents, only remembering changing a couple of names and copying it out neatly. The heartthrob was deeply moved and agreed to be my boyfriend right then and there. So, that letter was from Julian. Suddenly, things made a lot more sense. The one who got cheated on, the real victim, was Julian. This whole thing was getting seriously twisted. I lightly knocked on the doorframe. Julian looked up, startled. Hi. This is my home. Could you guys leave? Julian scoffed. I just bought this building. Seriously? Julian was only cheap with me. To avoid further pointless drama, I said, I'll buy back all the things I sold and return them to you through Mr. Davies. At this, his tone became strange. You and David are close, are you? Well, I did have over 200 pics of him on my phone. He fixed his gaze on me, a hint of mockery in his eyes. Got a new flame already? I found Julian's possessiveness ridiculous. He could get married, have a kid, and bring them home, but I couldn't even look at a six-pack. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then, his shoulders slumped, and he looked down, defeated. Anna, what is it about me? What's wrong with me? If you don't like Sophia, I'll keep her away. If you don't like me, I'll try to stay out of your life. Wait, what? Genuine white moonlight and substitute girlfriend coexisting? This guy was certifiable. I rolled my eyes inwardly. Was he only attracted to people who looked like me and Sophia? That game you play? I 100% explored all 3 maps and pulled all the characters you wanted. Yang Ming chimed in, that's how he ended up in the hospital. Julian's voice was weak. Why can't you ever see me? Back then, and now. I asked for your number, and you pretended not to hear. I learned sign language for 2 months, thinking I could communicate with you, and you pretended not to know me. So, the white-haired hooligan I'd met in my hometown that summer, that was him too. He was getting more and more worked up, his eyes reddening. The love letter I spent 3 sleepless nights writing, you copied it word for word and gave it to Jason. Do you know how I felt when I saw my letter in his hands? Guilt washed over me. And that necklace I made by hand, not only to celebrate our 7th meeting anniversary, but also our first year together. The next day, I saw it on someone else's neck. He hadn't mentioned any of that. How was I supposed to know that plain-looking, yet incredibly expensive, necklace had any special meaning? I cut through the emotional manipulation. Whose child is Sophia's? After a long silence, he finally whispered, mine. Julian, you say you love me so much, but it didn't stop you from finding another woman. Julian tried to explain, I was drunk. I mistook her for you. Don't even. That kid's at least 3 or 4 years old. We've only been together for 3. Yes, I met you later. That's why I always felt guilty towards you. Bringing Sophia and Ethan here was just to introduce you. After his last sentence, the room fell silent. Yang Ming used a throw pillow to shield his head, trying to become invisible. I was genuinely speechless. He brought Sophia here for a meet the other woman party? Was he confident or just plain stupid? But I was with him for my own reasons. I had no right to judge. 3 years ago, desperate for money to pay for my mother's astronomical medical bills, I'd planned to use my looks to find a sugar daddy. Initially, I targeted a chubby, seemingly gullible rich kid. But he drugged me and delivered me to Julian's bed instead. In my hazy state, I'd overheard him saying Julian had a white moonlight, and he wanted to use my face to curry favor with Julian, latching onto the Devereux fortune. Back then, to me, as long as I got paid, the who didn't matter. I'd have done anything. I still remembered that night, the torrential rain lashing against the windows. Julian and I sat on the bed until dawn, in awkward silence. The next day, he made a call outside, then returned and said, I'll take you home. Pack your things. I'll pick you up tonight. I'd said, okay. And that's how we'd ended up together, inexplicably, for 3 years, until Sophia's reappearance shattered the illusion. Yang Ming, seeing the impasse, spoke up, defending Julian. Anna, what more do you want from him? He even tried to kill himself for you. What else does he have to do to make you happy? Suicide? Was that something Julian would actually do? I looked at Julian. Let's talk, properly. Let's clear everything up. Why did you try to kill yourself for me? It's in the past, he said, feigning nonchalance. I mentally cursed him. Julian, I need to know what happened between us. I can't just walk away with someone's suicide on my conscience. After a long silence, Julian's voice, rough with emotion, finally broke through. 7 years ago, I sent you a file in your email. Evidence of Jason's cheating. Not long after, you added me on WeChat, asking me to be with you, saying you wanted revenge on Jason. We were together for 6 months. Then, you said you were still in love with Jason and wanted to break up with me. I couldn't handle it. I did something stupid. His account was concise, no wasted words. But it was riddled with holes, and I'd just spotted a gaping flaw. I asked, bewildered, wait, were you trying to be the other woman? I continued, first, I never received any file, and I never added you on WeChat. Second, I genuinely didn't know you back then, and I certainly wouldn't have asked you to be my boyfriend. Third, I only found out about Jason cheating in our 4th year together, not from any file, but when one of Jason's other girlfriends, suspecting me of being the other woman, came to confront me. He stammered, then picked up his phone, unlocking it. He opened WeChat, switched accounts, and logged in. It was a blank slate, only one contact. He tapped on the contact's moments. The last update was from the year Julian attempted suicide. Scrolling down, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The content, it was all my old moments posts. I pulled out my own phone, opened my moments, and saw that even the timestamps matched. The owner of this account, it had to be one of my friends. I asked Julian, you never actually met in person? Julian, realizing the gravity of the situation, said, she didn't want anyone to know about us. Back then, I insisted on staying in China. My father cut off all my funds. Didn't you ever think of coming to my school to find me? I did, once. I saw you from afar, walking hand in hand with Jason on campus. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. That was the second time I realized we came from different worlds. You were so beautiful, academically brilliant, the center of attention. And me? Without my father's money, even getting into a decent community college was a struggle. What right did I have to seek you out? Honestly, I didn't understand rich people's minds. We spent the rest of the day unraveling the tangled web. The WeChat account owner? Jason Su. My 8 times a cheater ex-boyfriend. I stared at Julian and Yang Ming, both utterly petrified. Julian, I said, I suggest you take some time to reflect. Maybe you're in love with Jason, wearing my face. Anyway, this multi-year farce is over. I'm leaving. Anna. He grabbed my hand, his eyes pleading. It's always been you I loved. Then, would you marry me? I shrugged, a helpless smile on my face. Julian, we were never meant to be in the same world. Even if I could overlook Sophia, you can't. Let go of Devereux Group to be with me, an ordinary wife. And your father would never allow someone like me to marry into your family. I can't marry you, but I'll always love you, always be good to you. My mother believed that line, became someone's mistress, and ended up miserable. I won't let my daughter follow in her footsteps. Besides, I can't just overlook this. Anna, Goodbye, Julian. Stepping out of the villa, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I hailed a cab, heading for the airport. To my surprise, the driver who accepted the ride was none other than Mr. Davies. We locked eyes in the rearview mirror. He quickly looked away, flustered. I stared at him, bewildered. Did Julian fire you? No. Then what is this? It's the weekend, I'm free. Miss Lin, are you going home? I saw through his flimsy excuse. Julian and I are over. And if you tell him where I am, I swear, the first thing I do back home is ruin your reputation. Mr. Davies, you wouldn't want your name to become gossip fodder for every aunt and uncle in my village, would you? I didn't go back to my hometown. Instead, I went on a trip, traveling to a different city. There, I bumped into my old middle school homeroom teacher, Ms. Liu. We traveled together for almost 2 weeks before returning to B City. Ms. Liu was a wonderful teacher, always kind to me. Now, she was determined to set me up with her brilliant son, Daniel Lee. He was 2 years my senior, rumored to be handsome back in school, though I'd never met him. That weekend, we arranged to have dinner at a restaurant. Stepping out of the hotel, a car was already waiting. The driver even got out to open the door for us as we approached. From afar, the driver looked strangely familiar. As we got closer, it was him. David Lee, the Didi taxi driver. David Lee was even more surprised than I was, bordering on panic. Then, I heard Ms. Liu say, "David, this is my son, Daniel Lee. Son, this is Anna. She's your junior from school." She winked at David. David Lee's expression shifted from surprise to utter terror. I calmly said, "Senior, hello." 2 blind dates in a row with him. I had to wonder if fate was trying to tell me something. David Lee stammered, "Mom, I just remembered I have urgent work. I have to go." Huh? Daniel Lee, what do you mean? I confirmed with you yesterday. What work? Mom, David Lee was desperate. If you walk away today, don't bother coming home again. Mom, David Lee was defeated. Inside the restaurant, Ms. Liu insisted that David Lee and I exchange WeChat contacts. He finally unblacklisted my personal account. But, his moments were now set to visible for 3 days only. A pity. After dinner, Ms. Liu went for a manicure, leaving David Lee and me to wander around the mall. David Lee adjusted his glasses, apologizing. "Miss Lin, I'm deeply sorry for the inconvenience. I will explain to my mother later." I cut him off. "Don't call me Miss Lin. My sugar baby life is over. I'm just Anna now. Miss Lin, Mr. Devereux is truly Daniel Lee. Mention his name again, or call me Miss Lin one more time, and I'll tell Ms. Liu about your late-night photos." Watching David Lee's pained expression, I couldn't help but smile. Daniel Lee, who am I? Nah. Good. Daniel Lee. With Ms. Liu's matchmaking efforts, David Lee had nowhere to run. He was cornered, resigned to his fate. Every weekend, he found himself chauffeuring us around, our personal Sherpa, carrying our bags. After a short while browsing the shops, Ms. Liu conveniently excused herself, leaving us to our own devices. David, my purse slung over his shoulder, took the 2 bubble teas I bought and handed one to me. "Chips or popcorn?" he asked. Popcorn. Once snacks were secured, we headed into the movie theater. 5 minutes into the film, I offered David some popcorn. He politely declined. Just then, familiar voices drifted from the row in front of us. "Dude, you finally get a day off, and you drag me to a rom-com?" "Shush," came a sharp reply. "Seriously though, what are you going to do now?" "Anna still can't accept both of them. I'll find somewhere to keep them for now." It was Yang Ming and Julian. Seriously? I thought. Julian's audacity was off the charts. Still aiming for the both worlds fantasy, was he? David stiffened beside me, instinctively trying to bolt. I held him firmly in place. Leaning close, I whispered mischievously in his ear, "Mr. Davies, you wouldn't want your boss to see you like this, would you?" David shot me a weary look, then seemed to deflate, surrendering to his fate. I held the bubble tea straw to his lips. Say odd dot. He took a resigned sip, looking utterly defeated. Julian seemed to catch a sound, abruptly turning around. David choked on his bubble tea, doubling over in a fit of coughing. I patted his back solicitously. He coughed even harder. "Relax," I murmured. "It's dark in here." I even put my mask on. Julian, thankfully, didn't recognize us and soon turned back to the screen. As the movie neared its end, the star-crossed lovers finally shared their long-awaited kiss. I glanced at David. He happened to turn his head at the same moment, our eyes meeting. He quickly averted his gaze, face impassive. David, I asked, do you want a kiss too? David slumped further into his seat, closing his eyes in mock agony. Why aren't you answering? Silence equals consent, I declared, leaning closer, my face inches from his. Just as our breaths mingled, he finally spoke. Talking is prohibited during the movie. Oh. Emerging from the theater, the light in David's eyes had completely vanished. He was like a discarded doll, all the stuffing gone. Feeling a twinge of guilt, I decided to lay off teasing him for a while. When we rejoined Ms. Liu, she surveyed the soul-crushed David. Did someone drain his life force? He ran into his boss, I explained. He's not afraid of his teachers. Why would he fear his boss? His boss is my ex-boyfriend. Ms. Liu paused, then burst out, wow. He'll probably get fired tomorrow for breathing wrong. I hadn't realized Ms. Liu had such a dry sense of humor. But the next moment, she was chuckling. Perfect. He can come home and take over the family business. His father is tired of pinning all his hopes on grandchildren that are nowhere in sight. On the drive back, David remained a shadow of his former self, radiating a profound sense of doom. Learning that I was planning to rent an apartment in B City, Ms. Liu launched into another sales pitch for her son, mentioning again the dog that could do backflips and how worth it would be for me to see. Perhaps David had reached the point of what's the point anymore, or maybe his brain had simply short-circuited. After a weak, token refusal, he didn't object further. Now I felt awkward, quickly changing the subject. Ms. Liu's flight was at 8 p.m. By the time we dropped her off at the airport and returned, it was already 9. David trailed me into the hotel lobby, a martyr marching to his doom. I unlocked my room, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. Mr. Davies, would you like to come in for a while? He slowly shook his head. Then why are you following me? Weren't you about to? He trailed off, looking confused, then something seemed to click in his mind, and he abruptly stopped mid-sentence. About to what? He adjusted his glasses, face carefully composed. Since you've arrived safely at your hotel, I'll be going now. He turned to leave. David, I called out. Your ears are bright red. David stumbled, then practically sprinted away. When I was filling out my college application, I'd been a bit love-struck. My grades were on par with Jason's, so I'd followed him, choosing the same university and major. Only after graduating did I realize the career path wasn't for me. Later, when Julian sponsored me, I'd worked at his company for a few days. A petty manager had made my life miserable. David's discreet help had almost blown my cover. To avoid causing further problems for either of us, I'd claimed to be Julian's cousin. Julian neither confirmed nor denied it at the time. Eventually, I got bored with the pointless office work and decided to quit altogether. Now, I planned to use this time while I was still relatively young to take the graduate entrance exam and switch to a major I actually enjoyed, then find a new job. But starting over was tough, especially after years away from academics. English vocabulary alone was giving me headaches. Needing a break, I hailed a cab and randomly chose a bar. I hadn't expected to run into Julian there. He was tucked away in a corner booth, a woman nestled close beside him. The lights were dim, but I saw the woman lean in and whisper something in his ear. He nodded gently. The woman looked strikingly like me. Yet, she exuded a sweetness, an innocence that was distinctly different. It clicked. She was the girl from Julian's phone wallpaper. Same face, but Sophia had a softer, more naive aura, while my features were sharper, more mature. At first, I thought I was a substitute for her. Then, I thought I was a substitute for the substitute. Turns out, I was just a substitute, plain and simple. If Sophia were here, I mused, they could play a round of face-swapping. Quietly, I slipped away, exiting the bar. Outside, it was raining. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contact list. To my surprise, I didn't have a single friend. Night had fallen. I started walking slowly in the rain. Someone bumped into me from the side, sending me sprawling onto the wet pavement. Looking up, I was met with a pair of gloating eyes. Oops, watch where you're going, will you? I couldn't resist rolling my eyes. Bad luck indeed. Jason, the man who'd turned my heart into a vast, barren wasteland of betrayal, was back in the country. He offered a hand, a smirk playing on his lips. Heard you were Julian Devereux's kept woman. But I also heard his real sweetheart, Jiangxi, is back. Dumped already? He should try that smugness on Julian later, I thought. See how it goes. Ignoring him, I tried to stand, but my tight, short dress made it an awkward struggle. Just as I was contemplating the least undignified way to get back on my feet, a hand reached down from behind, scooping me up effortlessly. Almost instantly, I was set back down, a black suit jacket draped over my shoulders. Turning, I saw David standing beside me, face grim. "Sir," he said, his tone icy, "this gentleman's approach is rather unrefined." Jason straightened up, eyeing David. Well, look who it is. Still hasn't been dumped by Julian, huh? My patience finally snapped. "Jason," I said, "while everyone has an orifice or two, you seem to have installed your head where your backside should be." David choked back a laugh. Jason glared at me, face contorted with mockery. I adopted a concerned expression. "Oh, wait. Didn't I hear something about your kidneys acting up? Did your little trip abroad fix that, or?" His face paled, turning ashen. How did you know?" "How did I know?" Because one of his ex-girlfriends had gathered all 95+ victims into a group chat. His 95th girlfriend had been very informative. David, ever the straight man, added solemnly, "Indeed, that's no small matter, Mr. Sue. You must strictly follow your doctor's orders. Otherwise, you might find yourself lacking in certain situations." You, Jason sputtered, then forced a laugh. Turning to me, he sneered, "Anna Lynn, let's see if you're still laughing when you get dumped. Consider it a blessing in disguise." Jason stormed off, fuming. David immediately stepped back, putting distance between us, as if I was contagious. "Miss Lynn, are you heading home now?" he asked, formally. "I don't have a home," I said softly, shaking my head. Returning his jacket, I slipped off my heels, hobbling forward, barefoot. A moment later, he caught up to me. Looking up at him, puzzled, he opened his umbrella, holding it over me. "Anna," he said, his voice gentle, "my dog can do backflips. Would you like to see?" What was happening to David? Had he been body snatched? Curiosity piqued, I nodded slowly. "Okay." He picked up my heels, then tied his jacket around my waist. Bending down, he offered his back. "My place is nearby. Let me carry you." "David, you sly dog," I thought. "Who knew you were such a closet romantic?" A light drizzle fell. Clinging to his back, I asked, "Am I heavy?" "Not at all." "Have you carried other girls like this before?" "No." "Ever had a girlfriend?" "No." "I don't believe you." David chuckled. "In high school, my mother forbade dating. In college, it was all guys. After starting work, it's just been endless overtime. No time to meet girls. But you had time to drive for Didi on weekends. I heard you earn $1 million a year. Are you really that broke?" He paused, then said, "Otherwise, Mr. Devereux would make me chauffeur him around for free." David lived on the 15th floor. As soon as he opened the door, a fluffy white dog bounded out, tail wagging furiously. The dog was adorable, a mixed breed, resembling a Samoyed with a hint of a local breed. He set me down on the sofa, taking out a pair of women's slippers from the shoe cabinet and placing them at my feet. "Leo, be good and keep Miss Anna company," he said, gently petting the dog's head before heading into the kitchen. Leo obediently trotted over to me, resting his head in my palm, making soft whimpering noises, his tail thumping against the floor. When I started petting him, he happily jumped onto my lap, curling up contentedly. Soon, David emerged from the kitchen with a steaming mug of ginger tea. He handed it to me. "Would you like a bath?" I nodded. "There's a bathtub in the bathroom. If you don't mind, you can wear a set of pajamas I bought for my mother." "Okay." When I came out of the bathroom, David was happily chatting with Leo. Seeing me, he put Leo down and turned to me. "Come here, Leo's going to put on a show for you." For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He'd changed into casual clothes, ditched his glasses, and looked like a college student. "Okay." I sat beside him. Leo stood on his hind legs, then with a graceful leap, executed a perfect backflip. Holy cow, the dog really could do backflips. The next morning, I woke up in an unfamiliar room. Something warm and furry was nestled beside me. Startled, I sat bolt upright. A fluffy white ball of fur was snuggled in my arms. Leo. Right, I'd fallen asleep cuddling Leo last night. Leo woke up too, jumping off the bed. He padded to the door and scratched at it. As soon as the lock clicked open, he dashed out. On the bathroom counter, a brand new toothbrush and a clean glass were waiting. I started brushing my teeth. Leo squatted by the toilet, doing his business. After finishing, he trotted over, a piece of toilet paper in his mouth, nudging my hand with his paw, then turning around, presenting his rear end to me. Wow, I thought. Leo is a dog with serious human instincts. My dress, clean and dry, hung on the balcony. On the table, bread and milk were laid out, a note tucked under the plate. Gone to work. Microwave the milk if it's cold. Don't worry about Leo. He's a big boy now. I ate my bread. Leo crunched on his dog kibble. I glanced at him. Sensing my gaze, he scooted back a little, making space for me. This dog is too smart, I thought. David's dog is practically human. Leaving the apartment, I noticed a set of keys on the shoe cabinet. I messaged David, but got no reply. A phone call went unanswered too. Key in hand, I went to his office. The receptionist greeted me with excessive enthusiasm. Miss Jiang, are you here to see the president? Silently, I pulled out my sunglasses and mask, put them on, and headed for the elevators without a word. I reached David's office unchallenged. Intending to just drop off the keys and leave, I heard his voice and Julian's outside the door. Freezing, I quickly ducked under the desk, crouching down. The door opened, footsteps approaching. Looking up, I saw David staring at me, a puzzled expression on his face. Hello, may I? I took off my sunglasses, offering him a polite smile. His eyes widened in shock. Julian's voice came from the outer office. David, who are you talking to? David's career crisis number, who knew how many it was, loomed. And no one, Mr. Devereux. Just, these documents you requested. David stood by the desk, recovering quickly. Excellent, David. With you around, I can always relax. Is the proposal ceremony all set? Julian's legs appeared in my line of sight. David subtly shifted his position, standing between Julian and me, shielding me from view. Linda is handling the details. I checked with her this morning. Everything will be ready for inspection by Saturday. Oh, and Mr. Devereux, the receptionist just called. Said Miss Jiang is here to see you. CC. Right, I know. Footsteps receded. David's voice came from above. Miss Lin, Mr. Devereux has left. I slowly stood, using the chair for support. Last night it was Anna. Today, it's Miss Lin. Changing your tune already? He glanced at the keys on the desk, changing the subject. Thank you for the keys, Miss Lin. I was in a meeting earlier, phone was on silent. Right. Well, Mr. Lee, I'll be going then. Let me see you out. Sure. As we reached the doorway, he stopped abruptly. What is it? I asked. He leaned down slightly, gently putting my sunglasses back on, then smoothing a stray strand of hair. Mr. Davies, I said, were you just flirting with me? He refused to answer. You totally were. We walked out, one in front of the other, attracting curious glances from colleagues. A bold female colleague called out to David, David, is that your girlfriend come to visit? Not wanting to cause him any trouble, I quickened my pace. As I passed him, my hand brushed against his. In the next instant, he took my hand in his. Startled, I turned to look at him. He just nodded calmly, a faint blush creeping up his ears. When I finally got home and was getting ready for bed, I noticed a message and several missed calls on my phone. All from David Lee. The message read simply, Miss Lin, are you free tonight? Formal, as always. I found his number and called. He answered almost instantly. Hello? His voice was bright, almost giddy. What's up? I asked. Have you had dinner? Yes, I have. Silence. His tone flattened. Oh. Sorry to bother you. Did I interrupt anything? A little. Apologies. Are you free tomorrow night? David's unusual behavior was definitely suspicious. Mr. Lee, I said, are you trying to court me? A soft yes came from the other end. Then, cautiously, would you accept? His shy, almost bashful reply made me laugh. Who asks for permission before even starting to woo someone? No wonder he was still single. David Lee, where are you? Downstairs, outside your building. I checked the time. 4 hours had passed since he sent the text. Past 10 p.m. Perfect time for a late-night snack. When I went downstairs, David emerged from the shadows, holding a bouquet of roses. The night air was chilly. He was slightly cold to the touch. Taking his icy hand in mine, I said, "You've been waiting down here all this time?" "Yes." "You're such a dork." David was like a frog, poke him once, he'd jump a little. Poke him again, he'd leap miles. I took the flowers, then pulled him towards the elevator. He seemed taken aback, stammering, What are we doing?" "No need to pursue me anymore. Your humble servant accepts." "But I haven't even taken you out for dinner yet. We've already met the parents. Let's not get bogged down in formalities. These things should be done step by step. And we're doing it step by step, aren't we? It's a bit late tonight." "Late? 10 p.m. is just the beginning of nightlife." "No, really, it's late. Leo is waiting at home for his dinner." David, face flushed, let me drag him along, looking scandalized as a virtuous maiden. Once inside my apartment, he perched awkwardly on the sofa, looking completely out of his element. I went to the kitchen and made him a bowl of noodles. When I placed it in front of him, his expression shifted, becoming complex. Sitting beside him, I asked, puzzled, "What's wrong? Is it not good?" "And no, it's delicious." David was unnervingly efficient. After finishing his noodles, he washed the dishes, swept the floor, and even folded the clothes I'd haphazardly tossed on the sofa. When he left, he even took out the trash. Watching him, impeccably dressed in his suit, doing housework, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Maybe marriage wasn't so scary after all. That weekend, we went to an amusement park. David, already handsome, looked even more youthful and relaxed in casual clothes, standing out in the crowd. After a day of rides and games, evening approached. Ahead of us, several couples walked hand in hand. David cleared his throat, extending his left hand tentatively. I happened to be taking a photo at that moment. His fingers brushed against my sleeve, then retreated shyly. Switching to the front camera, I linked my arm through his. "Say cheese, handsome." He instinctively looked at the camera. Click. The photo captured his bewildered expression. Tilting my head, I teased, "Perfect. You look like a goofball." His face flushed. Then, belatedly, "What did you just call me?" "Huh? Did I call you something?" I feigned innocence. He leaned closer, a feather-light kiss landing on my cheek. His eyes sparkled with amusement. "I heard you." This time, he boldly took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. We walked on, reaching a large open space where a crowd had gathered. Bright lights illuminated the scene. Someone was proposing tonight. I edged closer, craning my neck, but couldn't see the couple at the center. David seemed to realize something, his eyes narrowing slightly, his grip on my hand tightening. Finally, he sighed softly. Just then, I felt a pair of strong arms encircle my waist, lifting me into the air. I found myself perched on David's shoulders, finally able to see over the crowd. Julian, whom I hadn't seen for weeks, was kneeling on one knee, a bouquet of roses in hand. In the sky above, drones appeared, forming the names Julian and C. Cliched but romantic, cheesy but eye-catching. Jiangxi. She was his true white moonlight, the schoolgirl from his phone wallpaper. A wave of "say yes" chants erupted from the crowd. Jiangxi took the roses, and Julian slipped a ring onto her finger. They kissed amidst cheers, applause, and fireworks. I hopped down from David's shoulders. He said, "A month ago, Mr. Devereux asked me to investigate Miss Jiang. She attended Linlon High School before going abroad to study. That's where they met. He fell for her at first sight. Later, Julian mistook me for Jiangxi. David gently stroked my hair. Anna, are you all right? No, I admitted, wrapping my arms around his waist, shaking my head lightly. Honey, Julian knows I'm not his white moonlight, and I still scammed him out of all that money. Do you think he'll hold a grudge and send thugs after me? His hand paused. Probably not. I persisted, but what if? I know you work out, but even Bruce Lee can't take on a whole gang. He chuckled, looking down at me. I've worked at Devereux Group for so many years. The unspoken part was clear. He had plenty of leverage over Julian. Isn't that a bit underhanded? Only idiots resort to scorched earth tactics. You're so wicked, I said, smiling. I love it. David was a reliable, steady man. From the moment he learned I was preparing for my graduate entrance exams and struggling with English, he'd switched personalities and linguistic modes. In my presence, he became David Hua, speaking only in English. Groaning, I covered my ears. Stop, please. I came here to date you, not to study. Hearing this, David transformed into an English tutor, adjusting his glasses and saying, excellent. From today onwards, during the day, I am your boyfriend. In the evenings, I am your Mr. Lee, your English tutor. Miss Lin, put down your phone, focus your attention. Now, let's look at this short passage. No way. I held up his phone, scrolling through his album of photos. David raised an eyebrow, as if I were a particularly difficult student. Undaunted, he calmly walked over and sat beside me, casually unbuttoning the top button of his shirt. My gaze was drawn to the sliver of exposed skin, a flicker of anticipation igniting within me. I half hoped he'd unbutton the second one too. He caught my look, a knowing smile playing on his lips. He indeed reached for the second button. I rubbed my hands together in eager anticipation. Taking advantage of my distraction, he snatched his phone back, then rebuttoned his shirt, adopting a serious expression. Miss Lin, are you paying attention now? Damn it. The honey trap. After nearly a month of this tutoring, my English level had improved dramatically. And naturally, David and I had moved in together. By day, he was the composed, reliable second-in-command at his company. By night, he morphed into my personal demon tutor, wielding his honey trap with expertise. Every time I got distracted by his abs, he'd pull a fast one on me. I was both frustrated and intrigued. Leo was asleep at my feet. David, laptop on his lap, was working on the sofa. I crept up behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. Mr. Lee, I whispered, blowing softly on his ear. He calmly hummed an acknowledgement, but his ears flushed crimson. Miss Lin, what is it? I want to sleep with you. David's eyes remained fixed on the laptop screen, but his fingers froze mid-keystroke. Seeing my opening, I pressed on. Pretty please? Pretty please? David was just too perfect, too husband material. Abs, broad chest, it felt like a waste not to sleep with him. Who knew if I'd ever find another man like him? Seeing David hesitate, I lowered my demands, resorting to puppy dog eyes. Mr. Lee, I just want to see your abs. David closed his laptop with a sigh. Anna, have you really thought this through? Are you sure you want to spend your life with an ordinary man like me? I blurted out, yes, I'm sure. Now, abs, please. This time, he didn't refuse. I finally got to slip my hands under his shirt, feeling the long-coveted six-pack. After a while, I decided just touching wasn't enough. I leaned in and kissed him. David leaned back against the sofa, amusement flickering in his eyes. He removed his glasses, placing them on the coffee table, then his long fingers cupped the back of my neck, deepening the kiss, turning it from passive to passionate. Breaking apart for breath, I purred softly, honey, I'm cold. He scooped me up in his arms, carrying me towards the bedroom. Leo, roused from his nap, groggily trailed after us, only to be shut out of the bedroom. The bedroom was dark, lit only by the faint glow from outside. I could just make out David's hazy silhouette. The room fell silent, filled only with the sound of our mingled breathing. Just as things were about to escalate, a jarring ringtone pierced the quiet, coming from somewhere under the bed. David initially ignored it, but the ringing persisted. He sat up, reaching for his phone amidst the scattered clothes on the floor, answering the call. "Mr. Devereux, how may I help you?" He sat naked from the waist up on the edge of the bed, betraying no hint of the passion from moments before. Huddled under the covers, I watched him silently. After a few moments, he hung up, leaning down to kiss my forehead apologetically. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Miss Jiang was injured. Mr. Devereux wants me to get her some medicine." I huffed, annoyed. "Why is he calling you in the middle of the night? Can't he use a delivery app?" David sighed wearily. He kissed my cheek again, soothingly. "Anna, go back to sleep. I'll be back soon." "Humph." I grumbled, then added, "You better hurry back. Mr. Lee is the only one who can lull me to sleep." "I will." Just as I was drifting off to sleep, Leo snuggled beside me, then suddenly, the space beside me warmed, and an arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me close. Warm, familiar David. "You're back?" I mumbled sleepily. David hummed in agreement, pulling me closer. "Did I wake you?" Though I was half asleep, I stubbornly insisted, "No, I wasn't asleep. Only Mr. Lee can lull me to sleep." He chuckled softly. "Go to sleep then. Mr. Lee's holding you now." And with those words, I drifted into a deep slumber. The next morning, I was awakened by the doorbell. David had gone to work. Leo was by my side. Yawning, I shuffled to the door in my slippers. Opening it, I was met with Julian, face thunderous. Thinking I'd somehow opened the wrong door, I started to close it. He grabbed the handle, preventing me, teeth gritted. "Anna Lynn, I knew it. You are here." Puzzled, I stared at him. "How did you know I was here?" "I smelled your perfume on David last night." "Dude, are you a bloodhound now?" His voice grew sharper, accusingly. "When did you two get together?" "Julian, our arrangement is over. You have no right to question my personal life." "Was it David who seduced you?" His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse. "Tell me. Was it him?" "We fell for each other," I stated firmly. "Fell for each other? Bullshit. Someone as cold as you? You're incapable of falling for anyone." Julian grabbed my shoulders, his grip tightening. "I don't believe you like him. You're hurting me." His grip was too strong. I couldn't break free, wincing in pain. He sneered. "So, you can feel pain? Anna Lynn, I thought you were heartless." He was truly unhinged. I looked down at Leo, who was staring back at me, equally embarrassed. His possessiveness was jarring. So out of place. "Aren't you getting married?" I asked, trying to deflect. His body stiffened. "Are you jealous? Is that why you're with David?" "You're delusional." "Yes, maybe I am." He released me, sinking to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "These days, every time I close my eyes, all I see is you." "Why?" "Jiangxi is the one I loved from the beginning. Anna, tell me, why is this happening?" His voice broke, choked with emotion. Leo nudged my leg, quietly retreating back into the apartment. I considered his words, then said, maybe it's just habit. 3 years, Julian. Even with a pet, you'd develop some kind of attachment. He looked up at me, eyes pleading. "Why didn't you feel anything? We were never equals from the start. Our relationship was transactional. What kind of feelings did you expect from me? Dramatic heartbreak? Despair without you? We're adults, Julian. Don't be so childish. For 3 years, we each got what we wanted. We owe each other nothing. I gave you my heart. I gave you my love. So, I deserve this, is that it?" His twisted logic made me laugh, a bitter, humorless sound. "There were only 3 possibilities for us, Julian. 1, you marry me. 2, we become an ordinary couple. 3, it ends. You couldn't do the first 2. So why do you think your love entitles you to control my life? You think because I love you, I must automatically love you back? Relationships aren't a playground game, Julian. Love isn't a guaranteed exchange. If that were true, why wouldn't I just go fall in love with the richest man in the world? Julian, ask yourself honestly. Do you really love me? If you did, why couldn't you commit to option 1 or 2? Why was Sophia always in the picture? Why are you marrying Jiangxi? 3 similar faces, Julian. What exactly are you in love with? After a long silence, Julian clutched his head, his voice hoarse. I don't know. Think about it, I said. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my hand. I can't live without you. I can't live without CC either. Why can't you two be the same person? I yanked my hand away, slamming the door shut. Clearly, I'd been wasting my breath. Talking to a brick wall. Lesson learned, more books, less drama. Time to hit the books. When David came home from work, he found me buried in textbooks, raising a questioning eyebrow. Hitting the books hard today? I looked up from my study materials. Quick, get Jiangxi's WeChat contact. Mr. Devereux came to see you today? Yeah. Apparently, you smell like my perfume. Marry me. Okay. Wait, huh? I stared at David, bewildered. His expression was completely serious. I may just be one of many suitors, but I promise, you won't regret it. Mr. Lee, you're making me sound like some kind of heartbreaker. Are you feeling insecure? Yes, he admitted. I'm terrified of losing you. Mr. Lee, you're always so calculated, so in control. You're actually scared? He rubbed his forehead, a rare hint of vulnerability in his voice. Mr. Lee is only human. I don't believe it. Let me feel your abs. Prove you're not a robot. The next morning, at 8 a.m., we went to the marriage registry and got our marriage license. Holding the red booklet, I was still in a daze. Marriage was this simple? Just a piece of paper, and 2 people who loved each other became family? I turned to David, equally dazed. Aren't you going to work today? He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Got fired yesterday for stepping into the office with my left foot first. Currently filing for labor arbitration. My spirits sank. Is it because of me? He cupped my face in his hands, smiling gently. Just kidding. I quit. Really? Of course. I'd been planning to resign for a while. This was just a timely opportunity. So, Julian had fired him. I'm sorry, I murmured. I got you fired. He playfully rubbed my cheeks, a rare display of lightheartedness. Mr. Lee is highly competent, still young, good education. Jobs will be lining up to hire me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have rushed into marriage with you so quickly. Really? Of course. Or, you could check my abs again, make sure they're not fake. Always joking, even now. He must be serious about quitting. Within days, David had started a new job at Julian's rival company. Talent like his was in high demand. Only a fool like Julian would let him go. David thrived at his new company. And my exams were fast approaching. On exam day, David drove me to the test center. I was a little nervous, but seeing David's obvious, heightened anxiety, I just felt helpless amusement. Mr. Lee, it's just an exam, I reassured him. David sighed, looking utterly stressed. It's just my first time dropping off a child for an exam. I turned and walked towards the school gates. You'll have plenty more opportunities in the future. After the exams, our wedding planning kicked into high gear. David and I had 2 weddings, one in my hometown and one in B-City. Leo was our ring bearer. At the B-City wedding, Julian sat quietly in a corner, nursing a drink. He was a shadow of his former self, dark circles under his eyes, looking gaunt and worn. I'd heard that Julian's company had suffered significant losses due to his recent blunders. His father was now grooming his half-brother to take over. The company had been running on autopilot, with David handling everything behind the scenes while Julian chased women. Julian's every successful day of womanizing had been built on David's countless late nights at the office. Jiangxi, learning about my existence, had reconsidered marrying him. Julian was in a tight spot. But what did I care? I turned away from him, focusing on David, as we completed our vows, surrounded by family and friends. Now, I had it all, love and a future. Silly CEO, bye bye.